Cool. All right. We're now live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Let's actually get started. Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're talking with Brandon Celentano about what it's like to run an indie game showcase event.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. Thank you, Wendy, for that beautiful dancing emoji. As always, I'm your host here on the show, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy and the self-proclaimed Wizard of Joy. I like being a dorky wizard and helping people make games. This is a weekly event that we host on our Discords. It is mostly unedited, happens every Wednesday at 12 p.m., so feel free to swing by and join us for the next one and ask your own questions live. Now, joining me today is Brandon Celentano. Brandon is the director of Indie Games Showcase at TooManyGames, and it is awesome to have you on the show, Brandon. Welcome. What are you having for lunch here today?
Nothing too exciting. Probably just a roast beef sandwich.
Ooh,
nothing too crazy today.
Delicious. High in protein.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's fantastic to have you on the show. We've been kind of like flirting with this conversation for a couple of months, so it's cool to actually have it.
Yeah,
absolutely. So the all-important beginning of this show, every episode, is to tell the origin story. So, Brandon, where are you today, and how did you get there in the game industry?
Yeah, so I'm currently the director of the Indie Game Showcase at TooManyGames. For those of you who haven't heard of it, TooManyGames is a all-purposes gaming convention located in Oaks, Pennsylvania, about half an hour or so outside of Philadelphia. We have all the typical stuff you'd have at a gaming convention: video games, arcade, tabletop, tournaments, free play. We have a vendor marketplace, and we have guests and autograph signings. And we also have, and the part I'm in charge of is an indie game showcase where independent game developers from all over the country can come to showcase their games to attendees. And we have sections for video games, indie tabletop, and indie arcade. And so that's kind of my little slice of heaven in a much larger convention. We get about 20,000 attendees every year, and I'm responsible for the Indie Game Showcase specifically.
Amazing. And so how did that gig actually go about? Tell us that story. Who are you, Brandon?
It sort of happened by accident, to be honest. So I've been volunteering for conventions for the better part of the past decade or so. And I started with TooManyGames in 2019, and I held a bunch of different roles of 2019 and moving forward. And then in 2022, they're like, "Hey, do you want to be in charge of the Indie Game Showcase?" Because like previously, there was really nobody, there was no like dedicated point person in charge of it, so they needed someone to kind of just be dedicated to running it. So I was like, sure, why not? I have never made a game myself. Don't know if I ever will. Had never really had much exposure to the indie game industry in general, but I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I dove head first, and here I am. And I'm so happy to be a part of it.
I love that. Yeah, today, so over the weekend, IGA just did their second, what we call our Mega Jam, where we build a gigantic team for Ludum Dare with the intention of everybody getting experience working together on a large-scale team. And then simultaneously, tomorrow night, we have our current level 3 batch of students pitching their games. And I had a moment yesterday where I'm looking at all of these wonderful games that are coming out of our community, and I just full on in love. I love indies. I love people putting together, beautiful, awesome things for other people to experience. So I feel you. The indie game scene is the best scene.
100%. And like for me, one of the we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, today, but like one of my favorite things about the scene in general is just how supportive everybody is of each other. Everyone's trying to be successful, publish their game and make a lot of money, but at the same time, everyone is just like so willing to help each other out. Whether it's at TooManyGames or really any other event I've been a part of, like that's just like honestly just like one of the best parts of the industry, is just how helpful everybody is to each other.
Yeah. There's like clearly a little bit of trash up in here. The industry has some problems.
Yeah, to say the least.
But the people here, I would never leave in a million years. I love the game industry, and I love especially.
I feel the exact same way.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, I want to hear, maybe before we even move forward, I want to hear a little bit more about about the very beginning. Like, did you plan to get into games? Did it kind of sounded like it was a little bit of an accident, you fell into it? Like, what wound up even leading you to Too Many Games?
So I have a career, like my professional background is in like event planning and event management.
Hmm.
So one thing I always wanted to do to kind of get more experience in that field was just like volunteering my time at different large scale events. And I grew up as a video gamer. I'm a '90s kid. I grew up on like the N64, the
Oh,
Super
yes.
Nintendo, all that fun stuff. So I've just been a video gamer my whole life. So volunteering at conventions, specifically related to gaming, video gaming or other types of gaming, just felt like a good way not only to like not only get some experience, but also just to meet some like-minded folks and just have a really good time in general.
Hmm.
And Too Many Games, like I said, I lived in New Jersey at the time that I started volunteering for Too Many Games, but it was always like you're like not too far. I could easily do a weekend trip, and now it's right down the street. So
Hmm.
I do it these days, both for the experience and also just for the fun as well.
Awesome. So the topic for today we mentioned was going to be what it's like to run an indie game showcase event. Something that I've been known to say when people are looking for an indie game community and can't find one in their local area is to just start one, build it, and they will come. You'll find out who's in your area. So tell us then, Brandon, introduce us to this topic. What is it like? What does it take to run an indie game showcase event?
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm so happy that I got into it and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Hmm.
In terms of what it's like to run it, I was lucky in that, even though there wasn't a dedicated point person for it prior to 2022 when I took over, Too Many Games had been running it for a few years. So we did already have an established event that people knew about.
Hmm.
I think whether you're starting a new event or you're trying to take an existing event from scratch, I think a lot of it is just kind of talking to people. Even like in maybe areas where like you don't think there's a big game dev community, like there's still a lot of people that might be in your area that make games. For example, in the Philly area, there aren't really any big studios in this area because they're all like on the West Coast and whatnot, but we still have a lot of people in the area that are making games. Like we have some indie gaming dev groups that I've connected with, like the International Game Developers Association, the Philadelphia Game Mechanics, to name a few. And there's also a lot of schools in the area that have game design programs. So I think a lot of it, again, whether you're like starting a new event from scratch or try to make an existing event bigger, is just you try to figure out those gaming groups that maybe aren't as well known, but that do exist. And there's people there that are making games and would love to be a part of. I would love to be a part of your event.
Love that. Yeah. It is definitely a road, a lot of work to build a community like this. I'll tell you that. I think, Brandon, you can probably confirm this for me, but it has certainly taken some time to get IGA off the ground, and we're international. We're online. It's not even restricted to who I can find in my local area. So it's not the smallest ask in the world to build something in your local area, but you totally can. And at the very least, you can always start small. Don't be ashamed to have 3 people in the room at the same time. That sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like Too Many Games is a huge 3-day event that's been going on for 20 years. But again, it took 20 years to get to the point where it is currently.
Yeah.
So like, if you're ever thinking of starting an event in your own community, don't feel like it needs to be a massive weekend long event. It could just be one day that like for a few hours, or it could even be maybe it could be like an event that like tags onto another event. Like for example, like in Philly we have some other nerd slash gaming related events that aren't maybe like indie gaming or specific, but it's still catered to a gaming audience.
Hmm.
So that's like an opportunity there to maybe host like a small scale indie game showcase.
Hmm.
And
100%.
there's also a good amount of online showcases as well these days. Like there's the 6-1 showcase, there's the Tiny Teams, and a bunch of others. That I can't remember the names of right now, but it doesn't always have to be in person. There's opportunity to do digital only showcases where you show trailers, maybe you give some commentary on the games, have developer interviews, stuff like that.
Hmm. Agree. Awesome.
There's lots of ways there's lots of ways to go about it.
Lots of ways to get out there.
It's a short answer.
Yeah. So let's talk about then the like value of doing something like this as an indie developer. For the Indie Game Lunch Hour, our primary base of listeners is people who are making games, yes, but a lot of people are either actively or aspire to one day start their own studio. So for those people, What's the benefit of going to things like this? Do you advocate for going to events like this all the time? Is there a time and place for it? Give us a little bit of background there.
Yeah, it's definitely something I recommend, kind of regardless of what stage you're at. Like whether you at Too Many Games, for example, we have people kind of at all different stages. Like we have some people that like just have like a very basic demo of their game. Other
Mhm.
people are like out in early access. Other people have like fully released their game. So like there's all different stages you can be at, and I've seen people thrive regardless of what stage they're at. So I wouldn't let that discourage you.
Mhm.
And even if you're not even at the point where you've made anything yet, you're just like thinking about making it. Um, I think it's still a great idea to go anyway. Because like I was saying earlier, just like one of the most amazing parts of the indie gaming community I found is just like how supportive everybody is of each other. So like if you're thinking of making a game and wanna just like talk to other people about like how they did it, how they got to where they are currently, what advice they have to share. An indie game showcase convention is an amazing place to do that because developers are always really willing to share their knowledge and help each other out, I found.
Mhm. I 110,000% agree with that. I will so GDC is massive and too expensive and kind of cost prohibitive, but I will say that every time I leave there, the main value I feel like I've gained, like, yep, I'll gain connections, yep, I'll gain new knowledge, yep, I'll gain all kinds of stuff from those big events. But I feel like the main thing I get, and you totally get this at indie showcases and pretty much any kind of big game dev event, is just energy, is like excitement, enthusiasm. Like, oh man, I'm so ready to keep working on my game. And
Yeah,
that's
it's
maybe
extremely motivating to
yeah,
see like what all the other basically to like see all the other stuff that people are doing. And yeah, I agree. It's extremely motivating. Like
yep,
regardless of what stage you're at, it's very motivating to see that all these other people doing the same thing you're doing and that they're successful. But also, when you talk to them, you'll find that they are maybe experiencing some of the same challenges as you, and they found ways to overcome them, and they're willing to share with you how they overcame them.
mhm. Awesome. So here's then let's expand upon that a little bit. For those who are indie developers, whether they haven't even started something and they're just dreaming of it, or whether they're all the way in like their Kickstarter's running right now, or even they're on their third game as a studio. What do you believe the primary values are of going to an event like Too Many Games? What are those bullet point like? Here's what you're going to get.
Yeah, so there's a bunch. So you first and foremost, you're getting your game out there.
Hmm.
You're getting it in front of people who might not see it otherwise, and you're also getting feedback.
Hmm.
You're getting to see people play your game. You're getting to see the things that they like about it, the things that maybe they struggle with, the things that you can improve. You're getting, like I said before, you're getting to talk with other people in the industry, learn what they're doing. Exchange advice for how to do better in the industry in general. And yeah, I think it's honestly as simple as that. It's really just like really the main benefit is just getting your game out there in front of people, learning how to make your game better, and learning how to do better at what you're doing and connect with others who are doing the same thing as you.
Hmm. Love it. Yeah, sounds like the sort of big three that you're advocating for here are just exposure, and then feedback, and then networking. Is that am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how much of a difference meeting the right people can be, and like there's so much value, yes, to just of course getting your game in front of users, and that is often what people are aiming for the most. I got to get more people to wishlist my game. I got to get more people to follow or back me on Kickstarter, and yeah, that's certainly important. But having a good partner or two who can be there for advice, who can be there just to root you on, who can actually be a contributor to the game potentially, can make such a massive difference in your likelihood of success if we're talking about success, or just in your
Mm-hmm.
enthusiasm to work on the game if it's more like a passion project. So
Mm-hmm.
don't underestimate running into just that one person who might change the whole game for you.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I found as well that a lot of like our developers will stay in touch with each other throughout the year. So it's not just like they see each other for the 3 days at the convention and then they never talk to each other until next year. Like most
Hmm.
people are staying in touch with each other throughout the year, and that's something that I try to facilitate as well. So so think about the connections like not just at the convention, but also the connections you can make beyond throughout the year.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely agree to that as well. It is a This is an insular industry. A lot of people in this industry grew up playing games and didn't grow up hanging out with a whole heck of a lot of people. So having any kind of social outreach, especially as we get older and get a little bit more comfortable and realize we actually need human beings and human connection, any way that you can continue to grow that network and find those friends and find people that you enjoy talking with and hanging out with, it's huge. So don't underestimate that either.
100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's a good question then. So we talked about the value that can generally be brought to any dev who comes to something like TooManyGames. Let's say a lot of these indie devs who are running their own companies, they're working their butts off and they've got so much stuff to do. They're planning their Kickstarters. They're just trying to get the game built. They're trying to get their game in front of playtesters, etc. There's a million different things that sort of call for your attention. At what stage is it really important? So for those who are just overburdened with time, at what stage is it really important for you to go to something like this and make sure you fit it into your production schedule?
So you'd be like going to like a TooManyGames or another indie showcase.
Yeah. At what point during the production process is it like really important? You should definitely do this to fit something in like this.
Yeah, I feel like it can really be done as early as you have a playable demo. Like I said, we have people who showcase at all different stages. Some people have like the full game release, some people are early access, some people have like a demo with maybe like a couple playable levels. Again, we've had people at all different levels, and I've seen people succeed at all those different levels. Like for example, we had one game this past year where they didn't have a playable demo until like a couple months before the event, and when the event came around, their demo was like one of the best games I played that year. So I really think it can be done as early as you have a playable demo for people to play.
I would agree with that, and I actually think that's the most important time to do it. So I'm glad that you said it. I have found a lot of the time that when you go to physical events or online events for that matter, when you do conventions, when you do showcases, the actual number of paying users that you get out of that often doesn't justify the expense. You're not going to get like 1,000 people to buy the game and pay for an $800 plane ticket, or however, I don't know how much your game costs, but you get it. But what you definitely get is one, potential connections, potential networking, potential people to work on the game, potential partners to help you market the game. All of that definitely helps with bottom line sales. But where I have found this stuff to be the most valuable, and I'm curious if you agree, is during that feedback loop when you're still not quite sure what this game looks like. You've got something interesting, you know that it's pretty promising, you've got a good idea of how it plays, but then getting it in front of people and getting their input and their thoughts and iterating on what exactly the game is, that seems to be like the absolute most value, most bang for your buck moment to go to something like a showcase and get 100 people to play it and give you their thoughts.
I would definitely agree with that. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, because again, like one of those main things of one of the main benefits of going is to get your game in front of folks and basically see what they think, and get the good, the bad, and the ugly from folks. So I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Amazing. All right, my last question before.
And I also want to go back. Actually, I want to go back to one thing you said before. So I think we do have some games that go into a showcase maybe like wanting to make a ton of sales, like if their game's already released. But I do agree with what you said before that it's not necessarily about making the sales. I think that it's actually more important to get like the wish list and just like the general exposure. Just get like more people knowing about your game in general, and don't always focus on selling it. Because like at an event like TooManyGames, where there's like so many other things that people can buy, buying like just like a regular video game might not be on people's lists, like because they got all this other stuff that they want to buy as well, and they got a budget they got to stick to. So I tell developers, try to focus more on like the wish list, just like the general wish list if your game is on Steam, or just generally just getting your game information out there, not always focusing on making the sale.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the huge problems of indie developers is exposure and discoverability. And that is especially prevalent online. That problem is especially prevalent online. So for instance, if we, on iOS, there are now over 1 million games on that store. So, trying to compete with 999,999 other games is pretty dang hard. And then on Steam, the stat, I think the last time I saw it was like 62 games get released a day to Steam. So trying to stand out from that, especially in the online space where there's so much noise, is really hard. Where you can stand out is in any physical event. And you might not get 1,000 people to buy it, but you're definitely going to get the eyeballs and the time of, probably a couple hundred people. And you'll get it. You're going to have actual conversations with humans. you're not going to get lost because EA spent too much money on an ad or whatever.
Absolutely, I agree.
Awesome. My last question before I hand you over, because there's a bunch of good community questions, it looks like. My last question is, this is one that I hear all the time. How do I find my local community? Because a lot of places, there are parts of the world, if you live close to like a good sized city, you're probably set. You'll probably find that community, no problem. But in basically anywhere else, it's kind of hard to find that organized place to go for a local game dev community. How does one find a good local community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that so I guess it can depend on where exactly you are, like you said, but I think a couple good starting points I always like to recommend is schools.
Mhm.
That can be, like colleges and universities, because a lot of them have maybe, game design programs or like extracurricular game clubs, that sort of thing. Or it could even be, I know a lot of high schools and whatnot are getting into esports and gaming and stuff like that. So so it could even be maybe even like high schools. I would recommend starting there. Um, Another resource I'd recommend is probably meetup.com.
Mhm.
There are a lot of, of course, there's lots of groups on Discord, but I've also found that like meetup.com has maybe like these smaller groups that might not have a Discord server, but are still doing regular meetings in whatever location they may be in. So I would suggest starting with that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a couple of the same ones that I recommend as well. I like the idea of finding a school. There's classes that you can pay one-off for, especially community colleges and things like that, so you can join without having to tie yourself to a degree. Um, and then libraries is actually one. I happened to run a class at my local library in Atlanta pretty recently, and it went really well. Met a bunch of people in the area that I didn't know about, including a dude who like had worked on freaking EverQuest. So like, you never know. Just go to stuff like that. Meetup.com is great. Game Conf
Yeah.
Guide is one I send people to. There's a bunch of different places to find. Yeah, EverQuest
Yeah,
is
I'd
the goat.
also recommend. Yeah, and what I'd recommend is like local
Mhm,
game stores too. Maybe
mhm.
like not like a GameStop or like a chain like that, but like if you have like maybe like a local like board game or local video game shop, place like that, they tend to be pretty tied into the community and and often can help you get connected with some folks.
Mhm. All right. This has been a great conversation so far, but it's time to hand you off to the rabid community. I have pulled Rick up on stage, who is our chief question asker. Rick, would you like to hit up Brandon first?
Good to
Yeah,
see you again, Rick.
yeah, Brandon, good to see you too. Well, so you know, me and Brandon actually met at one of the biggest events on the East Coast, MagFest,
Amazing,
and we
yeah.
were both volunteering for the indie video game showcase there.
Nice.
So, Brandon, my question for you here is, from an event perspective, how do you even get involved to start with? Like first as an attendee, then potentially as an exhibitor, and then to move into organization of the events. What does that path look like for people?
Yeah, so I mean, attendee, as simple as buying a ticket. And in terms of like helping out, most events are pretty transparent when it comes to taking volunteers or staff. Like a lot of times, there'll just be like an app, just like a link on the website that you can fill out to a volunteer. You can put in your information and maybe say like where you want to volunteer for. Typically big events like these are almost always recruiting, so there's usually always a spot for anyone, kind of regardless of what you want to do. And sometimes I didn't start out in the indie showcase department. I started out in other roles at TooManyGames first, but kind of getting in is that first step. Once you're in, and maybe you're not going to do what you exactly want to do your first year, but once you're in, you kind of have an idea of how everything works. You can start making some connections and talking to people who are doing what you want to be doing, and you work your way to a position that you want to have.
Awesome. What if they wanted to showcase? Like you see that the show, these events are happening and you happen to have a game. Like how do you even get started with that?
Yeah, so for TooManyGames and for MacFest, so the convention that I'm involved with, it's just an application. So like for example, TooManyGames, shameless plug, we are at the last weekend of June, and we'll open applications last weekend of the last week of January. They go up on our website around that time. When you apply, you just got to put in some info about your game, like the name, description, details about like your studio. And we also do ask for a playable demo, because we do play all the games that apply. And we want to play them all, get a feel for how they are, judge them, give some feedback. So yeah, it's really just apply. And even if it's always competitive with these events. we only have so many spots, and we get X number of applications. But I always say never let that discourage you. It's always the more eyes you can get on your game, the better. Is what I always say. And again, we play every single one and give feedback. So the minimum, you're going to get people playing your game for applying, and you're going to get some feedback even if you're not accepted.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Brandon. Next, we have Faceless Apple.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So my question is on the line of networking. So basically, I've been in event management for the last 4 years as well on startup side, and we have this notion of sometimes doing the virtual side of the event and sometimes not doing it. But are there any events, or what's the overall consensus for game events to have like the virtual side as well?
I'd say I've seen a good mix of both. So there's events like TooManyGames and MacFest that are primarily in person, but there are a good number of indie showcases out there. I've seen kind of like 6-1, Tiny Teams, Summer Game Fest. They have like an virtual indie showcase. So I've seen a good mix of both. And honestly, I personally think that both are worth your time. Whether you can go to an event in person, if you can go to an event in person, that's awesome. But if you get to have your game included in like a virtual showcase, that's awesome as well. I know one thing that we're trying to do TooManyGames is have, because like really our showcase is kind of pretty strictly in person right now, but we definitely want to have more of a virtual element so people can, people who are maybe not at the convention can better learn about all the games that are showcasing and check them out.
In general, I have found that you're going to get much more. In general, I find you get more value out of in-person events. And I think that's just basically the human factor. People like actually remember you and like smell you and know you. Versus online events, it's a little bit easier, I think, to sort of forget people. And therefore, the networking is not as strong, and neither is the exposure, because they just don't remember your game as readily. But that said, obviously, what's nice about online events is they're way cheaper to attend, typically free, or at worst, the price of the ticket. So I think, the answer being a good balance is probably the right answer. Get to some physical ones because they're so powerful, but online ones are great for when you can fit them in.
Yeah. Like I know that it's definitely a big expense and time to get commitment of time to go to an in-person event, especially for like an all weekend one. So obviously, if you're going to being a part of some event is better than being a part of none, in my opinion. So if there's just maybe no in-person showcases near you, or if you just can't get to them for whatever reason, always look into virtual showcases, because again, any exposure for you to get your game out there is better than none.
Awesome. Does that answer your question, Faceless Apple?
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Rick, do you want to ask? Misha also in the audience is prompting me to tell all of you that IGA hosts online events. So come join IGA. There's links to join down below. Okay, that's enough. Rick, would you like to ask a second question?
Yeah. Do you want me to ask the one about organizing these events, or the one about what exhibitors can do to prepare?
Let's go. Let's start with let's do the second one, because I think that'll reach more of the audience.
Yeah. So what are the best ways that you've found? Because as an organizer, you've seen a lot of people showing off their games. What are the best things that you've seen people do to prepare to make the most of these events?
So I think a lot of it just comes down to having like a good booth set up at like the convention center, wherever the event's being hosted. So that's not in terms of just like supplies, but also like the people behind the booth. Like you want to understand that a lot of people that go to these conventions can be maybe a little shy and reserved, and they might just walk by your booth and not pay you any mind unless you have some way of like drawing them in and inviting them to check out your game. So I always recommend having people, whoever you're gonna have staff your booth, make sure that they're like outgoing and you are willing to like kind of talk to random people and draw them in and encourage them to try out your game. And then of course, so like having the right people is the first thing, and then also I think just the right supplies as well. So having good signage that like says that like what your game is, and also I think adding some humor to it as well can be very helpful. So like a couple examples. So at TooManyGames this past year, we had one group that had like a robot fighting game, and they had this funny sign they were holding up that said "Hot Robots Here," and that was funny, and it drew people in. And then we had another game that was roughly similar to Portal, and they had a sign says, "Do you like Portal?" ? So that was also kind of just like unique, kind of entertaining way to catch somebody's eye and draw them in. So that's also a big thing, just like thinking about setting up your booth with signage to draw people in and just the right people there that are outgoing and willing to talk to people and rope them in to try the game.
I love that. They're at IGA exhibited at a booth recently, and on the second day, the people who were running the booth for us put up a giant Elmo GIF on our one screen, and that apparently became the most powerful static attractor out of anything else that we had tried.
Yeah, so at this past year, like once that one group started doing a sign, everyone else started doing the same thing as
Right.
well. Everyone else started having funny signs and other attractive things to make their booth more visually appealing.
I love that.
So when you get a bunch of people there to your booth and they like your game and they love it and they're just like, oh, I want to know more. Like, what are the best ways you found that people like have a CTA set up for them to follow with?
Mhm.
Like, what have they done? What have they prepared on that front?
Yes, there's a couple options for CTAs. I think the best one to have, if you can, is if your game has a Steam page, is tell people to wishlist it.
Mhm.
Even if you don't have a playable demo yet, you might just have like a coming soon. Have an avid for people to wishlist. What I always recommend having is like a QR code, whether it's on like a regular 8.5 by 11 sign or like a business card with a QR code. You have some way for people to easily go to your Steam page and wishlist your game there. Also have kind of like the other ways for folks to stay in touch. So like I always recommend that folks actually bring like business cards to a convention that have not just like the name of the game, but also like the name of your studio, like your contact info, like your social media handles. Again, link your QR code to your Steam page, or if you don't have a Steam page, like link to like your itch page or your website and any other links, social media links like Discord, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Or if you're doing like a Kickstarter, for example, you have maybe a link to follow you on Kickstarter, something like that. So
Mhm.
those are all. So there's lots of different ways to definitely lots of different CTAs, and give people all the ones that you have. Make it as easy for them to connect with you in the way that they want to connect with you.
I love that. There's a
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. There's an approach that I've used in the past, which is I always think of my passives versus my actives. So I always have a passive attractor and a passive CTA, as well as an active attractor and an active CTA. What I mean by that is things that operate themselves that do not require my booth handlers to do anything. That's our passives. And then things that require somebody to actually be active. So for passives, I'll usually have like something cool that says like, hey, if you come join the Discord, this is going to happen. And then my passive CTA is here's a giant QR code to join the Discord. So that can snag people, hopefully keeps them in the booth for a hot second. And then if all of my booth managers are talking to somebody, at the very least, we're hopefully going to snag people that way. And then the active is more like, here's an actual CTA, which, oh, by the way, what's a CTA, Brandon?
Call to action.
Yes.
And while we're on this topic, another thing I recommend is have some kind of like reward for people to take that CTA. So like if somebody wishlists your game on Steam, give them like I don't know, like a sticker or maybe some kind of like other branded apparel or swag,
Yeah.
give them some kind of reward or thank you for doing the action that you want them to do.
We started doing those little ribbons that you can stick on your conference badges. You know what I'm talking about? They're like,
Yeah.
People love those.
That's a good idea. We should do that as well. I might
Yeah.
steal that idea.
Please do. Yeah. People freaking love those. And we asked them to do a air quotes quest beforehand, and they love that even more. So it says quest complete Indie Game Academy. They freaking love that. So anyway, have some passives, have some actives, because there's going to be moments where there's so many people at your booth that you can't help them all. So having something that at least you're going to collect them a little bit is always good. Kind of think about it like a bank. How do I bank these people so that later, I can withdraw. That sounds maybe transactional. I don't mean it that way. All right, Roberto, you've been sitting patiently on stage this whole time. And would you like to ask your question, sort of an extension of what we're talking about already?
Yes, I do have a question. So how does a game developer set up a booth or a panel showcasing their game before the event starts?
So for TooManyGames, I can speak for TooManyGames. So it's a Friday to Sunday event, and we have setup time on Thursday and Friday, so you can come Thursday or Friday to set up your booth. We do, of course, give some supplies for you to get started with. Like we do provide like a table, chairs, like the shared electricity, but and then you provide like the computer, controllers, everything else. But we do build in setup time. The day up, the day like the day it starts before, and also the day before you to have that time. And also, I know for Too Many Games, I send out a full packing list of here's all the supplies you have to bring for a successful booth setup. So there's no ambiguity as to what you need to have to be successful.
Does that include like the displays, like when you go to a booth, you see like displays, like cardboards and stuff like that, like showcasing like maybe some characters or the game cover, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely recommend having some kind of signage or artwork. And I've seen people get creative. I've seen people have giant cardboard cutouts of some of their game characters. I've seen people have like regular banners that they put on like their pipe and drape or their table. So yeah, absolutely. Again, just it's all just having that those supplies to make your booth visually appealing and make someone want to come by and check it out. So
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so all those and the supplies, like the game developers are responsible for like setting those up, like essentially.
Yeah.
That's
Usually
correct.
there's a load-in period before the event where people are not allowed in yet, and so you've got an hour or two to actually set things up. Also, oftentimes the event is going to give you some stuff. Usually that's like a table and 2 chairs. And then also, I encourage everybody. This is all great advice. Thank you, Brandon. But seriously, I encourage you to just go try it. If all you have at your booth is like a single piece of paper with a QR code and then a device to show your game off, that's fine. Go for it. Do it. And then you'll learn through that process how to do it a little bit better next time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, one more question. So,
all right, last question.
For the
Roberto.
event, so basically, so does the game dev, do they have to contact like the event saying, hey, or like sign like an application or something saying, hey, we have our game and we want to showcase our game in this event, like things like that. Do they have to
so
do that?
So you basically fill out an application, and then the organizers, me and whoever, will let you know if the game's accepted or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's usually on their website, right?
Yeah.
I have a question.
And if you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to give you more details on how exactly Too Many Games works and kind of all the steps that someone needs to follow to apply, if that's helpful.
There will be contact info for Brandon down below. Amazing. I've got a question for you, Roberto. Listeners can't see this, but Roberto is currently walking around some kind of city center while talking to us. Where the heck are you?
I'm actually in New York City.
Amazing.
Around close to Times Square.
Christy knows it so well. It's New York City, 34th Street by the Target. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. All right, Roberto, thank you for your question. I'm going to send you back to the audience. All right. And Rick, you've got a third question. You want to hit us with that one?
Yeah, so this comes from an event organization perspective. You as the organizer, there's a lot that goes into running these events. Who are you in contact with and who do you collaborate with to put these together from a logistical perspective and from an outreach perspective?
Good question. So quite a few. So of course there's all the other Too Many Games staff that I coordinate with, just the other convention organizers in different departments. We're all coordinating. In terms of outside Too Many Games, we're coordinating with the venue itself and the staff who work at the Expo Center. We're coordinating with our decorator. They're the ones that set up all like the tables, the pipe and the drape. That the indies use for their booths and for other spots at the Expo Center. We coordinate with other vendors. Like for example, we have vendors that bring in like some of the arcade games, some of like the console games. We coordinate with security because we have volunteer security, but also like paid security staff floating throughout the space. We coordinate with an AV vendor to get speakers and projector screens and stuff like that. So it's definitely kind of a broad mix of people from all over that we coordinate with for different pieces of the convention.
How do you do outreach to get exhibitors coming in to show and to get attendees there?
So the outreach, so the outreach is it's varied. So we do. I think we do a lot just through like the normal mediums. Like we do a lot through just like we have like an email list that we use. We have social media, Discord, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So a lot of it is there, and a lot of it is also in-person outreach, like talking to like local businesses and telling them that like we have this event coming up. You not only to like prepare them for like a crush of people of their businesses. For example, we have like a Wawa near our expo center, and we tell them in advance, hey, we're coming this weekend. You're going to get really busy, so make sure you're prepared. And a lot of it is also, so I think a lot of it is local businesses as well. And a lot of it is just honestly just going out and talking to people, whether it's in a virtual setting like this or just going out and talking to people in just different settings, whether it's in a group setting or one-on-one, just kind of telling people about the convention. Because it spreads very easily via word of mouth, and you tell one person, they'll pass it on, and they'll pass it on, and so on and so forth.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Cool insights. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we've got RJ up on stage. RJ's got a really good question for you. You want to hit us with it, RJ?
All right. Yeah. So, Willem, Rick, I don't know if you're involved in this, but thanks for inviting me onto the stage. And yeah, real quick, pure coincidence. Saw Brandon last night at a Philly IGDA event in person, and just out of coincidence, I didn't realize, Brandon, that you'd be a guest in today's podcast. So,
Yeah.
what a small world. Yeah. Well, anyway, nice to see you again, Brandon.
You too. Yeah.
Okay. So my question, I'm thinking it's a pretty simple one, but so when these indie devs, when they want to apply to showcase at TooManyGames or at MagFest or just indie dev showcases in general, are there any red flags that you recommend that these applicants they try to avoid?
Yeah, definitely. So one red flag, and this sounds probably really simple, but I have seen it come up a number of times, is make sure that all like your links are working on the application. So like the link to your website, to your Discord, like to your demo, make sure those are all working. Cause a lot of times like we get so many applications that like, if there's like one link somewhere, like we can't evaluate a game, that's kind of like an automatic no. Cause like we just don't necessarily have the time to follow up with someone if something's not working, just because we have so many other applications to go through. So I'd say that's the big thing. Again, simple, just make sure that like, just make sure like all your links and whatnot are working on the application. And also number two, like I said, we do require that you have that you submit a demo for your game in order to be considered. So make sure that so like another red flag we see is like not providing instructions for how to play the demo. Like obviously a lot of games have like an intro or tutorial that says here's how you play the game, here's the controls. But maybe there's some games out there we find that don't always have that, and that makes it harder to evaluate the game. Can be more frustrating because we maybe don't know how to play the game, and it's going to take us extra time to figure it out. So that's what I'd mention. I'd say that's probably the second big one, is just make sure that like there's that your demo has a tutorial that explains how the controls work, or if not, you make sure that you're telling us what the controls are so that we're able to play it.
I think unless I'm wrong, RJ, you were actually asking about in reverse, right? How do I know if a showcase is a red flag?
Oh, no. Brandon answered the question that I intended. Yeah, like, so thanks, Brandon, for identifying I didn't even consider that, even though it's such an obvious thing. Like, if your links don't work, then that's a immediate no-go. And then, like you said, making sure that the reviewers have the info they need to play the game. So, but anyway, Willem, yeah, Brandon answered my question. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yeah,
RJ.
and what I always say as well is if you're ever not clear as to like what's required in an application, reach out. Reach out to me or whoever's overseeing the applications and, ask. Make sure that when your application goes through that, the information is correct and it's in the way that, the judges need to see it. I'm always happy to answer questions from applicants or prospective applicants about making sure that when they submit, it's the best application possible.
Amazing. So I actually, now, first of all, I'm going to do two things here. Number one, I am going to extend that question, but before I do, I'm going to do the question of the day. So the first person to answer this question, where we reiterate one of the most important things we learned from Brandon, will get 3 House Cup points here at the Indie Game Academy. The question is, what are the 3 values of attending an event like this as an indie developer that Brandon told us? Type in the chat for us. Holy crap, Christy was on top of things. I do not need to ask any other questions. Yes, indeed. The 3 values were exposure, feedback, and networking. And then I tacked on a 4th, which is just motivation. Christy, let us know which house you want to give those points to. I am going to actually extend that question because I misunderstood what RJ meant, but I think it's a good one. How does somebody who is applying to an event know if that event might have red flags? Maybe I shouldn't showcase here.
Well, I'd like to think that Too Many Games doesn't have any red flags, so I
Yeah.
might be I might be a little biased in answering this. But I think maybe just like one good way to do that is to like talk to people who have showcased there in the past. So like for example, and I think that is possible because like for Too Many Games, for example, and for MagFest and probably others, like we do post all the games that were accepted on our website. You know, like the link to their game, link to their website. So in many cases, there is a way to contact someone who has showcased in the past and ask them, you know, what their experience was like, you know, what they liked about it, what they didn't like. And again, like I have no problem if someone reaches out to me and asks that question as well. Like, tell me why Too Many Games doesn't suck, and I'll happily tell you. Yeah, I think that's it. Just really just ask, and people will tell you.
Amazing.
You know, I found that like I've said a couple of times, developers talk to each other. So like if people think that they had a great time at your event, you know, they'll say so. If they think they had a bad time, they'll say so.
Yeah, that's good. It's funny to ask this. I don't actually think there's too many spammy showcase events because it's hard to really like. It's hard to scam somebody with a showcase event, I think. But yeah,
I'd like to think so. Yeah.
yeah. But I think, you know, reputation. If there's undue like financial asks, if they're like, yeah, it's $100, it's $500 to exhibit here or something, and you don't even know who they are. I guess at the really big events, $500 to exhibit is not that much. But yeah, if anything, trust your gut, maybe, is the advice I'd give. If you're like, this feels off, then do your research. Rick, I feel like you've got a thought.
Yeah, the red flags could also apply to the event itself and whether or not your game is appropriate to show there. Like for example, if you have a dating sim, you don't want to show it at a fighting game convention.
Or maybe
Just because they have the indie showcase, that doesn't mean that your target audience is there. So like it may not be a red flag for the event itself, but it may be a counter indicator that maybe you shouldn't take your time to go show there.
Yeah. That's a great point. One of those things that I love teaching indies because it means that I get to see a lot of those pitfalls that people run into early on and learn to, you know, disseminate knowledge to avoid those pitfalls. And one of those pitfalls that a lot of juniors make is they don't really have an actual target audience. I guarantee your game is for a specific crowd of people and mostly not for everybody else. So think about who that person is if you haven't already, and then think about who's joining that event. And if those two groups have a big enough Venn diagram to justify the expense and the time to go to it. Something like an indie dev showcase, you're almost certainly going to be good. Indie game creators love playing indie games. But yeah, like don't go to a car show expecting people to play your dating sim unless it's about car show people dating. I don't know. You figure that out. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll add to that as well is that, you know, I don't really think there's like a specific, in terms of Too Many Games, I don't feel like there's a specific genre of game that doesn't do well. You know, we have a pretty wide variety of games that have showcased with us in the past, and I think they've all done well. So for Too Many Games, at least, I wouldn't necessarily I don't feel like your game needs to be a particular genre or style, because again, we've seen all different types succeed.
100%. All right, it is. I'm going to have us ask the last question. And by the way, for those curious, Christy gave her 3 points to Rangers. So well done to the Rangers. Wendy is up on stage for our last question of the day. Wendy, would you like to hit us with it?
Sure. Hey, Brandon.
Hi.
This question for anyone on stage that chooses to answer. I'm kind of in conference mode myself. I'm going to DevLearn. There is a game design workshop I'm attending, so that's the closest I've gotten to a gaming industry event. So I'm super excited in Las Vegas. So this is really timely. My question for any of you is, what was your first convention, conference, event that you ever went to?
So I guess I could answer that first. So I think the first one I ever went to was a convention called ZenkaiCon. They're not really a gaming convention. They're focused. They're based out in central Pennsylvania and Lancaster. I still volunteer for them. That was the first one I did in 2012 or 2013, I think. Yeah, and I'm still involved, like I said.
That's awesome. This is kind of a funny one. If we're talking exhibiting in general, I exhibited at a I don't remember what it was called, but it was like a home improvement convention for a painting company that I used to run. That was my first time exhibiting ever. And that was when I learned to be insane. If anyone has ever exhibited with me, you know that I'm insane. And I think my first gaming one was actually with Playcrafting, who's a great community out of New York, to potentially work with. And it was just like a very sort of casual indie game showcase event. It's like, I don't know, 50 people, something like that. All right. It is time. Oh, Wendy, you want to jump in on that? Say that again.
Thanks to all of you. That's it. I just want to say thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy.
No problem.
Heck yeah, that was a good question to end on. Rick, by the way, says that AwesomeCon 2022 was his first one. All right, it is time for us to end out the episode. Before we do so, though, Brandon, we like to do two things here. And the first one is to assign a little bit of homework. So what is something that those listening can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Good question. I think probably the best thing I can think of is finding like a gaming group that is in your area, whether it's a school, library, game store, something else. Find make an effort to find some kind of gaming group that's relatively in your local area.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I almost always encourage people to put their homework up online. So Brandon not only wants you to find a gaming group in your local area. Yes, as Rick points out, the IGDA local chapters are a great place to start. There's one in almost every major city.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other ones, meetup.com, GameConf Guide. You can totally find a local group. So find a local group, and then I want you to go to LinkedIn. I want you to tag us, the Indie Game Academy, possibly tag Brandon Celentano, and say, hey, I found a group. Thanks to your homework. Here's the group. I'm going to go and join it. That's your actual homework. Find that group, post about it so that you are committing to going to an event with them. Because game devs love all too often to say they're going to do something and then be like, once we get to the event, we go, but I have to see people, and then we don't go. So I want you to commit to us online.
Add a second item to that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So a second item I could think of for homework is maybe talk to one indie developer who has showcased at any convention,
Awesome.
TooManyGames or anything else, just ask them about their experience.
That's perfect. All right, so you've got a two-parter because neither of these are too time intensive. Find a local event and then talk to a game dev who has exhibited before. And then tell us about it on LinkedIn. You can tag us and we will get all excited for you and stuffs. All right, it is the end of the episode. Brandon, before we say goodbye, do you have any last words of wisdom or anything you would like to plug here at the end of the episode?
Nothing comes to mind. No, I think I kind of share what I was hoping to share today. I think maybe just like the biggest takeaway I can, I guess leave you all with is, again, just remember how, the Indie Game Academy community, everyone is so supportive of each other here. And that really does apply to the indie game industry as a whole. So regardless of where you are in your journey, whether you're thinking of making a game, you're making one now, you're planning to go to a convention, you're thinking of going to one, just remember how supportive everyone is of each other, and and just like don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Yeah. And if I can ask, actually, if you will help perpetuate that mentality in that community that we have created in indie games, do so. Take a little bit of time to be as kind and supportive to other people in this space as you possibly can, because it's a pretty hard space. We may have had some evidence about that the past couple of years. So yeah, be kind and good to each other. All right, Brandon, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you for giving us some perspective into exhibiting and showcasing as an indie game developer. You can learn about Brandon. We're going to have links down below, Brandon Celentano, and we'll have a link to TooManyGames as well. As always, we host this event every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, so feel free to swing by, join us for the next one, and maybe ask your own questions live. There's links to our Discord down below as well. All right, that's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody. Brandon, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's great to be here, and hope to see you at TooManyGames. Would love to have you guys next year.
We absolutely will take you up on that. All right, and thank 100%. You. Heck yeah, thank you for those who asked questions, and thank you to those who listened. If you did listen, as always, we ask that you think of just one other person who could learn something from this episode and send it along to us for them. So, wait, what was that? Send it along to them for us. There we go. All right, goodbye, everybody. We're gonna see you again next time. Adios.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right, and for those watching live on Twitch, LinkedIn, or YouTube, we love you. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again soon.